Dustin Hoffman finally speaks up about Robert Dairo at 88. Dustin Lee was the name given to Dustin Hoffman. Hoffman was born on August 8, 1937, in Los Angeles, California. Hoffman came from a middle-class Jewish family that fostered creativity, even though they didn't completely comprehend his strong interest in the arts. He was shy, introverted, and not at all like the charismatic athletes whom people looked up to at the time. But it was that precise sensitivity, an openness to emotion, and a willingness to watch people with almost anthropological intensity that subsequently became the basis of his acting brilliance. Hoffman's early troubles, like not being sure of himself in school and not knowing what to do after high school, made him see acting not as a glamorous job but as a way to survive, as if it was the only place where he could be himself. He didn't have an easy time getting into acting. Hoffman didn't do well in college and dropped out of Santa Monica City College. He then moved to New York in the 1950s with the goal of training at the actor's studio. He had to work a lot of menial tasks, like typing for other people, doing odd jobs in theaters, and performing in little off-Broadway venues. He lived in small apartments with other young people who were also trying to make it, such Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall, who were not well known at the time. They became friends because they were hungry, ambitious, and believed that acting was more than just a job. Hoffman worked hard to learn method acting, taking in what Lee Strasberg and others taught him and establishing the careful, psychologically based style that would become his trademark. When Dustin Hoffman eventually got to Hollywood, they weren't ready for him. In the 1960s, leading men were expected to be tall, well-groomed, conventionally attractive, and in charge. Hoffman was none of these things. But Mike Nichols found in him the perfect example of Benjamin Braddock, the disillusioned young man in The Graduate. 1967, his performance changed the way things were done in the industry. Hoffman became a symbol of a new time, contemplative, anti-heroic, weak, and real. The Graduation was more than just a success. It shook up the culture. Hoffman's unsure look, his awkwardness, and his honesty struck a chord with a generation that was questioning what society expected of them. He moved from being a struggling theater performer to one of the most important voices in modern Hollywood overnight. His next parts were lessons in how to change in Midnight Cowboy opening parenthesis 1969 closing parenthesis as Razzo Rizzo, the limping, grifting street survivor whose fragility showed through his tough fod. He shocked viewers. Hoffman made him unforgettable by making him both tragic and very alive. Hoffman built up an impressive resume throughout the course of the 1970s and 1980 seconds. Lenny, where he played the unstable comedian Lenny Bruce. Kramer vs. Kramer, in which he played a damaged father vying for his son's love. Tootsie, where he dressed up as a woman to show how unjust his job was. And Rainman, when he played Raymond Babbitt and gave one of the most challenging and respectable performances of his career. Each character showed a distinct part of his artistic personality, which was fashioned by empathy and a strong desire to comprehend what it means to be human, not by vanity. Hoffman won a lot of trophies, including 2 Academy trophies, several Golden Globes, and Lifetime Achievement medals, but his work in movies goes beyond that. The real legacy he left behind is how he influenced generations of actors to be honest instead of theatrical. Hoffman helped bring about a new way of presenting stories in Hollywood by being brave enough to talk about pain, comedy, awkwardness, ugliness, and fragility, one that put emotional honesty above of style, and one that was brave enough to show characters that were imperfect, contradictory, and very human. Dustin Hoffman and Ann Byrne met in 1963 and started a relationship that would have a big impact on Hoffman's early years as an actor. Hoffman was still trying to make a name for himself in the acting industry at the time they met. He was doing odd jobs, going to auditions, and getting involved in the lively theater scene in New York City. Byron was already a mother and had worked as an actor, photographer, and creative person. She shared Hoffman's bohemian lifestyle and love of art. They got married in May 1969 after being together for a few years. At the time, Hoffman's career was taking off after he became famous for his role in The Graduate 1967. And continued to be praised for his role in Midnight Cowboy 1969. Their marriage was a big deal for both of them, and it helped Hoffman stay grounded as he dealt with his sudden stardom. Hoffman adopted Karina Byrne's daughter from a previous marriage. This showed that he was committed to making a blended family and making everyone in their home feel like they belonged. Hoffman and Byrne welcomed their first child together, daughter Jenna, on October 15, 1969. This added another level of excitement and responsibility to this life-changing time for Hoffman. Hoffman and Byrne moved to Greenwich Village, one of New York's most politically charged and artistically lively districts, in 1970. When America was at its most culturally tense and politically unstable, their house was next door to a townhouse where members of the Radical Weathermen organization lived. This group had formed out of political activism and resistance to the Vietnam War. A bomb that was being built in the basement of the townhouse went off by mistake, killing 3 people and sending shockwaves through the neighborhood. At that point, Hoffman and Byrne were thrown into the turmoil. Hoffman can be seen in archival footage standing outside in the street shortly after the explosion, looking about and taking in the full extent of what had happened. This clip from the 2002 documentary The Weather Underground gives a remarkable picture of how close Hoffman was to a time of great political change, showing how his personal life was affected by the politics of the time. The event also showed how unpredictable life was in the village at the time, when even famous people may suddenly find themselves witnessing national history. Hoffman and Byrne had been married for a long time and had many normal and unusual adventures together, but their marriage eventually fell apart. They got divorced in 1980 after being together for more than 10 years. This ended a time in their lives that was full of early stardom, young fatherhood, and quick personal growth. After his breakup, Hoffman went through another emotional change and rediscovery. During this time, he found comfort in Lisa Gottsigan, a lady he had known since childhood and had strong personal ties to. Their families had known each other for years, which gave their relationship a base of trust, warmth, and familiarity. They started dating at that time. Shawn was finishing her Juris Doctor degree, which showed the mix of smarts, drive, and independence that Hoffman liked. Their romance rapidly became a strong and lasting one, and they got married on October 12, 1980. Hoffman's marriage to Gottsigan represented the start of a calmer, more stable time in his life compared to the chaos and intensity of his early years. Hoffman and Gottsigan had a big family that was very close. On March 22, 1981, Hoffman became a father for the first time again, this time in a more stable and settled home. His first child, Jacob Edward, was born. 2 years later, on March 17, 1983, Rebecca Lillian was born. Maxwell Jeffrey was born on August 30, 1984. Each child was born during a time when Hoffman was juggling big movie roles, industry praise, and the growing responsibilities of being a father. Their youngest child, Alexandra Lydia, who they affectionately called Ollie, was born on October 27, 1987. This made the family of 6 complete over the years. Hoffman has talked about how much his kids meant to him and how they offered structure, meaning, and comedy to his life. He said that the stress of his job was balanced by the warmth of a busy home. By 2024, Hoffman is a grandfather many times over. He enjoys watching his family expand and carry on a new generational tradition. His lengthy marriage to Shawn and his blended family from his first marriage show how love, strength, and the emphasis Hoffman has always placed on family bonds have impacted his life. Dustin Hoffman and Robert Dairo were 2 of the biggest names in American acting for decades. They were both important figures in the realism-driven revolution of 1970s cinema. Even though they were both alive at the same time and sometimes worked together, Hoffman didn't often talk about how he felt about Dairo in public. He is now 88 years old and has decided to speak up. His comments are thoughtful and slow, and they come from a place of age wisdom, a blend of respect, honesty, and a lifetime of experience. Hoffman argues that, at some point, you look back at the people who had an impact on your life, even if you weren't directly involved, and you feel like you have to finally say what you never took time to say before. Hoffman starts by talking about the time when both actors were still unknowns who were hungry and auditioning in little New York settings. They lived on hope and coffee. He says that Bobby was different. He possessed this intensity even before anyone knew his name, as if he were already in a movie that no one else could witness. Hoffman says that even though their careers went in different directions, he always felt a connection to Dairo because they both believed that acting should feel terribly, almost excruciatingly real. He remembers seeing early cuts of Mean Streets and Taxi Driver and feeling that Dairo was changing the rules. Hoffman says, "I thought this man was going to change everything." He did. Hoffman says that even though their methods were very different, Dairo They were both practically obsessed with being real. Hoffman says we were never rivals in the manner people think, but we kept an eye on each other. We taught each other things. When I saw Bobby vanish into a job, I thought, oh my God, I need to step up my game. I assume he felt the same way when he saw me. It felt like two musicians were performing in different corners of the same room, trying to hit notes that made the other one go higher. He remembers meeting Dairo in the early 1970s, when they were both still eager, ambitious performers competing for the kinds of complicated, gritty roles that defined the decade. Hoffman says that their first talks were cautious yet polite. Two young people with equal parts admiration and caution are surrounding one another. Bobby was silent, and often uncomfortably so, but he listened, Hoffman says. He took it all in. And when he did talk, he thought about it. I was the other way around. I talked too much. I was too worried. I asked myself a lot of questions. But we somehow got each other. Everyone felt like they were part of something bigger occurring in movies. Even though they respected each other, the two didn't work together very much. When they eventually did, in Wag the Dog, Hoffman was startled by how disciplined Dairo was on set, almost like a monk. Hoffman says, he's quieter than people think, but there is a maelstrom of thought inside that silence. No one I've ever seen gets ready like he does. He seems to have the whole emotional structure of the movie inside him. Hoffman adds that watching Dairo work up close made him realize how much more he still had to learn, even after decades in the business. He continues with a quiet giggle. At my age, you don't expect to meet a teacher, but Bobby educates just by being himself. When asked why he waited so long to say what he really thought, Hoffman thinks of how competitive Hollywood was when they were at their best. He admits, you don't always praise your peers. Sometimes you're too busy trying to stay alive to be seen. And sometimes you're just too scared to say that someone else inspired you as much as they did. Hoffman thinks that age has taken away the ego that used to make him careful. He says that when you're 88, you don't hold back. You tell the truth because that's all you have left. But the most moving part is when Hoffman says that he now sees Dairo not only as a co-worker, but as a reflection of his own artistic path. We were both from the same world. Scrappy New York stages, broken apartments, and great hopes. We take those ghosts with us. He says, I've always admired him more than I ever said, more than he ever knew, and his voice gets softer. Hoffman wants his comments to reach Dairo in the end. Not for publicity but for closure. I simply want him to know that sharing a moment, an era, and even a tiny bit of a road with him has been one of the best things that has ever happened to me.